As I think back over these past 41 years with you, I remember Salem, Oregon, Sunday, February 23rd, 1975, when you asked me out on a date.
How forward.
Sunday, March 1st, 1975, our first date, when we drove to the coast and I slipped on an embankment and slid down in the mud on my butt. Tuesday, March 11th, 1975, as we took a walk in Bush Park, where I proposed to you 10 days after our first date. And you said yes. And a half hour later, when you said, you know that question you asked me? Were you serious? Silver Creek Falls and Elton John, friends. Thursday, July 24th, 1975, our wedding on the hottest day of the summer in a church without air conditioning.
And Virgil had the flu.
Our first apartment, where we used incense and disinfectant spray to cover up the smell of stale cat pee in the carpet.
Did it work? No.
And your desire to please God. Cupertino, California. The huge trail of ants from the front door all the way up the stairway into the bedroom and onto the bed where last night's pizza was engulfed by the mass of hungry ants.
Oh, dear.
When you fell asleep standing in the middle of the kitchen with a jar of jam, dropping it from your grasp. The pie crust my mother helped you make with extra baking soda in it, as the crust literally dripped off the edges of the pie. And your love of God. Los Gatos, California, where Mrs. Mummy fixed you a grilled cheese sandwich with stinky goat cheese, and you graciously ate it. And your devotion to God. Kent, Washington, how you laughed when Christina was flying a kite near the wading pool as I yelled, "Look out for the pool!" Curse splash. Your VW Bug that was stolen out of our driveway at night.
Oh no.
Your daily Bible reading and prayer time. Hobart, Washington, living in the middle of the woods with our 3 children and 3 foster children, and you did most of the work of raising them. You spending 2 weeks with them in our unfinished home where the only running water was in the bathtub while I was in another state. Now we're still married. Snapping beans in the middle of the living room floor, and you canning 80 quarts of beans.
I think it was only 78.
The reaction of a woman in the grocery store when, at age of 25, your 15-year-old foster daughter said, "Mom, do you want me to get some of these?" Your laughter upon seeing me after I had finally wrangled 2 pigs out of the muddy garden. And your love of God. Beaverton, Oregon. Luciano, the canary that died in the winter.
Oh.
And we couldn't bury it, so we put it in the freezer.
For years. And my mom found it.
The Amish family that we met on the train and invited to spend the night with us. Their curiosity regarding the canary in the freezer. How you prayed when I got offered a job in New York, and your willingness to follow me anywhere God led us. Our 2 family lists of why I want to go to New York and why I don't want to go to New York. Our drive to New York with me driving the van with a pickup truck on a trailer and you driving the other car with a packed trailer. Visiting Yellowstone while we got a tire on the moving van repaired. Arriving in Houghton, New York, not knowing where we were going to live. Living with my new boss and his family for 2 weeks. Your devotion to God first. and to me second. Candia, New York, where the tap water looked like tea and where it snowed 3 feet overnight. When you said in your late 30s, "But I'm too old to go to college," and the wise older woman responded, "Well, if you wait, will you get any younger?" The desire in your eyes as we drove to the airport and passed a 160-year-old Victorian farmhouse with a for sale sign in front of it. Our disappointment when we returned to New York and learned that it had been sold. Our questioning God when a month later, after we had signed a 6-month lease on our rental house, as we learned that the sale on the Victorian farmhouse fell through. Our lesson of patience and trusting in God as we waited until the lease was up. Our disappointment when we learned that we couldn't afford the 160-year-old Victorian farmhouse. Our delight when they accepted our ridiculous offer. Sitting next to you in church as you leaned over to me and whispered, "Chicken coop."
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened in church.
He didn't know what I was talking about.
And your desire to serve God. Rushford, New York, our 160-year-old Victorian farmhouse on 150 acres. Swatting bees as we pressed nearly 40 gallons of apple cider and stored the gallon milk jugs full of apple cider in our freezer in the garage. The 1/4-mile walk down to our very own creek where we watched our dog pick up rocks from the bottom of the creek and drop them on the shore. When you graduated from college, summa cum laude, in spite of Dr. Greenway and his stupid test questions, and you got your first teaching job. Your desire to be a godly witness to your students in a public school environment. The joy in your heart when they asked you to speak for their graduation. The look on your face as I swung a broom in the middle of our bedroom and hit the flying bat in midair.
Oh, dear.
Thousands of fireflies. Listening to the peepers as we lay in bed. Niagara Falls in the winter. And your incredible prayer life. Greenville, Illinois, as we sat on our back deck and watched a most spectacular thunder and lightning display that filled the entire sky. Being in awe as we drove over the Mississippi River for the first time. Driving out of town to purchase a can of beer so we could make some beer batter for frying our onion rings. We lived in a dry town. And I was not allowed to have alcohol because of my job. Leaving the can of beer in our refrigerator for nearly 2 years because we didn't make the French fry onion rings. Worrying that someone might see it.
Mom, why do you have beer in the refrigerator? Because I'm a lush.
Our trip to Lake Placid with Jim and Ellen Manoia. Your loving friendship with Ellen and your sadness at her death. The house church in Highland and you as a pastor's wife. Your excitement when you learned that there was an opening for a high school English teacher at Salem Academy. Loading a moving van on a snowy Christmas day. The joy in your heart knowing that we were following God, but the sadness as well, as we were driving away, leaving all 3 of our married children behind. And you always seeking God's direction for our lives. Salem, Oregon, looking for a house to purchase and walking into one that reeked of cat pee.
Can't get away from it.
It's a Salem thing.
It's a Salem thing.
Negotiating for 3 months with the bank and finally agreeing on a price. Wondering why God provided us with such a large house until your mother needed to move in with us. Asking God what was next when your mother moved to an assisted care facility. hearing God's answer as our daughter and her 2 children moved in with us. Hearing God's answer as our son also moved back in with us. Hearing God's answer as our other daughter and her husband moved in with us for a couple of months while they searched for a place to live in the Portland area. The look on your face when we finally got a chicken coop. Driving nearly an hour to church in Portland, praying that God would lead us to a church where we could get more involved. Following God's lead to a church where the entire family can be involved. Our almost never having an argument, except about who loves whom the most. Your servant's heart. You are such a blessing to all. In sonnet number 43 by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach, when feeling out of sight for the ends of being in ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet needs, by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely as men strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears, all of my life. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. Happy birthday.
Oh, isn't that cute?